Atom. I think I installed it on my Windows. There's no compiler, right? And I think there's something called packages where you can get like Swift or something.
You don't have to. You can install it if you want, but it's completely optional.
So you're just there to just type. It doesn't correct anything. It doesn't color code.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
okay.
So.
Can we just start?
Thank you for the email.
Yeah.
Does this work?
Try it again.
Does this work?
Yeah, that's working.
All right. Can you guys hear me? Yes? I want to know if I can just clip it.
Yeah, you can clip it, I think.
Alright, hey guys, welcome to the second lecture. Today we're going to be talking about UIKit and AutoLayout. Going through some logistics first. Make sure that you are enrolled in Piazza and CMS by now. If you haven't, please post on Piazza or just come to us after class. Another reminder, every week after lecture, the assignments, lecture demos, video lectures, and lecture handouts will be uploaded to Piazza and the course website. Course website, cornellopdev.com. And a last reminder, I think we forgot to mention this last week, but like someone asked a question about this. Projects should be done individually. If you have like questions, you can post in Piazza or come to office hours. Any questions about that? Cool. To start off, we're just gonna review a bit of what we did last lecture. So here is just like a snippet of code. It's sort of similar to what you guys had for homework. What gets printed to the console when we run this? If anyone knows, you can raise your hand. Buy food twice. Why do you think?
Just say study for prelim first and then buy food.
Yes, why?
Because since task is a struct, task B, when the second line is actually just a copy of task A.
Exactly.
Reference.
Yeah. So since task is a struct, and we know that when you assign variables to a struct, a copy is made. Even though we changed task B's title, that doesn't change task A's title because there are two different task objects. Does that make sense? Second one, what happens when we try to run this code? Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I think it would give an error because B is not optional int, it's a regular int.
Yeah, exactly. So since A is of type optional int and B is of type int, we'll actually get an error because optional ints can be nil, whereas ints, variables of type int cannot be nil. So unless we safely unwrap A, you can't set B to A. Good? Alright, cool. So now we're going to talk about UIKit. What is UIKit? UIKit is a framework created by Apple, given to us to help us create iOS applications. There are like three main parts of UIKit that we're going to be using. The first are view controllers, and this is just, its job is to like manage its root view, and then inside of that root view you can add any number of subviews, and its other job is to also coordinate with other objects in your application. But for today's lecture, we're going to be focusing on the first half of that definition. The other aspect are views itself. So like some examples are just like UI image view, UI button, UI label, and UI text field. They all do exactly what they sound like. A UI image view displays an image, UI button is like a button, label is a label, text field is a text field. And there are like a ton more. You can always just find them if you just Google like Apple UI view. And then the last part is AutoLayout. So that's sort of like our second topic, AutoLayout. What is AutoLayout? AutoLayout is what allows us to create constraints on anchors to size and position your views on the screen. So what exactly does this mean? Well, let's just first see what anchors are. Here we have like a screenshot of a sample application. It's actually what we're going to be building today. This whole screenshot, like this whole view is our vControllers view, and then inside it we have multiple different subviews. So we have like that image view, which is of Bill Gates, a UI label, which says hi, I'm Bill Gates, and then a UI text view, which is that purple box. And then for every single view, you have multiple different anchors. The left edge is called the leading anchor. The right edge is called the trailing anchor. the height anchor determines how high the view is. The width anchor determines how wide the view is, and then you also have top anchor and bottom anchor. So what does it mean to create constraints? So let's say I wanted to make the left edge of our text view to be 8 pixels offset from our view controller's view. So like you see there's like small padding on the left, like right here. If we wanted to create that, we would create a constraint on our leading anchor of our text view, and create a constraint on that in relation to the view's leading anchor. That might sound confusing now, but we're gonna do a demo, and then everything should be a lot clearer. And then another thing to mention is for the top anchor, you see that it's not just top anchor; it's safe area layout guide the top anchor, and then same thing for bottom. The reason for that is because whenever you try to activate constraints in relation to the view controller's view, views top anchor or bottom anchor, you can't just do top anchor or bottom anchor. The reason for that is because if you look at like the iPhone 10 device, on the top there's like that status bar, and on the bottom there's that like padding that we have, right? And you're not supposed to put any views in there, because if let's say you just put like a button on the bottom right here, and then the user was trying to exit the app, then they would be clicking your button and would be unable to exit. So that's why we have this like safe area layout guide bottom anchor and safe area layout guide top anchor. So now we're gonna move into the demo aspect. So we're gonna create our first Xcode project. So to start, just open up Xcode, and then click create a new Xcode project. We're going to be making single view applications. You're always going to be making single view applications. Give it a name. So I'm just going to call it lecture 2. And then make sure your language says Swift and not Objective-C. We're going to be using Swift. Next. And then here you just store it wherever you want. I'm going to save it in my documents. Is everyone up there? Yeah. I think you can put anything. I just put my name. I don't think it really matters.
It doesn't matter.
Alright, cool. So here we now have our Xcode project. On the left, I should make this bigger. On the left, we have our sort of like file hierarchy, which is just like the files that are currently in our project. On the top, we have this play button, which is what we're going to be using later to run our code. And then here you have like, you just see like some device name. This is how you select which simulator to run your application on. So if you want to run it on an XS, you can run it on an XS. Or 10S, my bad. If your computer is slow, it might be better to run it on like A+ or something, just because XS tends to be a lot slower. So the first thing we're going to do is go to our main.storyboard file, and essentially what a storyboard file is it allows you to drag and drop views onto this screen and then create views like that. But for various reasons, we're going to be doing everything programmatically, so we're not actually going to be using this. So every time you create a new project, just delete the storyboard file, and then move to trash. And then also go to your info.plist, and then there should be a row that says main storyboard file base name. And then you see this like minus symbol. Just click minus. Did everyone get that?
Which one is it?
Main storyboard file base name. And then you just click minus to delete it.
Sorry, how do you see that menu?
It's the info.plist file on the left. How do you...
Like what happens if you press the plus?
It zooms in on the file. There probably is something though. Editor,
No.
team, presentation, doc. I don't think that did anything. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep it like this. Is everyone caught up? Alright, cool. So the first thing we're gonna do is go to this app delegate file. Inside this app delegate file, you should see this function that says application did finish launching with options. And this is essentially the function that gets called when you first click on your app and it gets launched. And in here, what we're going to want to do is initialize and set up our window. So the window is essentially what our application is going to be running in. If you don't set up the window, you can't see your application. So you see that Windows of type UI window. So let's just do window equals, and then it's going to be a UI window. And then you have two different initializers. We're going to be using the frame of type CG Rect one. This essentially just asks you to provide some sort of like frame for your window. So like what's the origin and how big and how wide. We want our window to be the full screen of our application. So we're going to do UI screen dot main dot bounds. This just means the size of our whole screen. And then in the next line, we're gonna want to set our Windows root view controller property. So this root view controller just means the first view controller to display when we create a window. And if you look at look at the view controller file that Xcode should have already created, you can see that it's of type UI view controller. So we're just gonna be using this. So we need to create an instance of this class view controller, and we're just gonna do that by doing view controller, and then open parentheses, and then close parentheses. This just creates an instance of the view controller. And then lastly, you're gonna want to do window.make key invisible. What this does is it just shows the window and then makes it the primary window. So every time you create a new project, all the steps up until now is gonna be like what you do every single time. The only thing that might be different is like the view controller that you set as a root view controller. So let's say you have a login view controller and you want that to be the first thing that shows up, then you would do login view controller here. In our case, we're just going to be using view controller, so this is what we're going to do. Any questions? Okay, now let's go into our view controller file, and then we see this function called view.load. This function gets called after our view controller gets instantiated and then everything gets loaded. So here is where we want to run any code after our view controller is set up. So to start and just like make sure everything works, let's try to change the background color of our view controller's view. So to do that, like I mentioned, our view controller has a view property, which you should be able to see just by typing view. It says the view that the controller manages. And then this view has a background color property, which is of type UI color. UI color is an enum. So let's say we wanted to set it to red, right? So we would do UI color dot red. You can also do like purple or blue or whatever. We're gonna do red. And then now let's start running our application and making sure that everything is still working. So to run, you can either press this play button on the top left, or you can do Command R. So either one should work. And then it should say build succeeded, and then a simulator should pop up. It's gonna take a while to start up, so yeah.
What does override mean?
Override? Oh, so override essentially means that view.load is a function that's already implemented in the UI view controller class. Since we're subclassing this UI view controller, we want to do some additional stuff in addition to just whatever they do by default. So we have to override the function and then perform our additional code. So it's just like our UI view controller class defined a view.load function. We want to override that.
Okay, so it's like taking the view.load function and like adding stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, let's see if it ran. Oh, yeah. So now we see our application and the view is just red. Does everyone see this? Good? All right. Perfect. All right. So now we're going to actually yeah. Yeah.
Oh wait.
Yeah, he's going to come and help you.
If you have any questions, like raise your hand and one of us will come to your computer.
So when we set our background color, what we did was UI color.red. Can everyone think of a shorter way to do this? Yeah. Just .red, right? Since background color is of type UI color, which is an enum, as long as we do type .red, your application will know that it's UI color.red. Let's just change it to white, just because we want it to be white. And then the application we're gonna be building is this one. So the first thing we're gonna do is create this image of Bill Gates here. So this is actually of type UI image view. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna declare a variable on the top of our class for this image view. I'm gonna call it image view. So var image view is of type UI image view. And then I'm also gonna add this exclamation point. Essentially, we know that this image view is going to be present in our view controller because we're gonna initialize it and set it up. So we're just adding this exclamation point to tell our application that this must exist. And then let's go in here, and then let's initialize our image view. So image view is equal to UI image view, and then we're just going to use the empty constructor. So this initializes our image view, but then we need to actually set the image that this image view is going to display. So did everyone download that Bill Gates image? Or as long as you have any image, it should work. But essentially, go to your Finder and then find your Bill Gates image. And then on the left, you should see a folder that says assets.exe assets. Essentially, this is just where you want to store any image for your application, whether it be the app icon or just any other icon you want to use. So we're going to drag and drop this Bill Gates image onto the left bar here. After you drop it, you should see something like this. It's just gonna show your image. Okay, so now let's go back. So we've initialized our image view. Now we want to set the actual image that this image view is gonna display. So the way that we do that is we're gonna do image view dot image. So every image view has an image property which is of type UI image, and we're gonna create that right now. So UI image view dot image is equal to UI image. And then if you do open parentheses, you should see multiple different constructors. We're going to be using the one that says named of type string. Yeah. Do you have a question? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, just let me know if I'm going too fast. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, so for this UI image constructor, it takes in a string, and this string is just going to be the name of our image that we dragged in here. So in my case, it's called Bill Gates. You may have saved it as something different, but just type whatever name you saved it as. So here it's just going to be Bill Gates. The next thing we're going to do is set a property called image view.clips to bounds. Essentially, what this property determines is just whether or not your image that you decide to display should be constrained by the size of your image view itself. We want this to always be true so that your image doesn't actually go outside the size of your image view. So we just set that to true. The next property we're going to want to set is the content mode. This content mode just determines it tells your image view how to display and lay out your actual image. There are three different main ones that you usually use. One is scale aspect fill, scale aspect fit, and scale to fill. They're all slightly different. Scale to fill just makes your image the same size as your image view, but this might change the aspect ratio, so it might look kind of ugly. There's scale aspect fill, which keeps the aspect ratio, but then also makes it the same size as your image view. Since it's keeping the aspect ratio, however, it might be that it cuts off certain parts of your image. And then the last one is scale aspect fit, which just maintains the aspect ratio and then tries to fit it as best as it can. So we're going to be using this one. Usually this one looks the best. And then the last thing we're going to do is add this image view as a subview to our view controller's view. So to do that, we're going to do view, which is just our view controller's view, dot add subview. And then this add subview method takes in a view of type UI view. In this case, it's just our image view. Any questions? Cool. So actually, let's try running this right now and see what we get. So if you run it, you actually shouldn't see anything yet. Can anyone guess why? So the reason is we've instantiated our image view and we've added it as a subview, but we haven't told our application where to position it and how big it should be. So it just like doesn't know what to do with it. So to do that, we're gonna want to set up our constraints using AutoLayout. Usually you don't want to put your constraints in your view.load because then the function gets too big. So we're gonna create a function outside view.load called setup constraints. So func setup constraints, taking in no arguments, and then just make it empty, and then make sure that we call it at the end of view.load. So what this does is once our view controller gets loaded, it runs this code, and then it's gonna call setup constraints. And then in this function, we want to set up all our constraints. So to set up our constraints, the method we're going to be using is NSLayout constraint .activate. And this method essentially takes in an array of constraints. So we're going to do backspace, open bracket, close bracket, and then new line. And then here, we're just going to put in all the constraints that we want. So looking back at our image, let's say we first want to determine we first want to put a constraint on our image view's top anchor, and let's say we want it to be 24 pixels from our view controller view's top anchor. The way we're going to do that is do image view dot top anchor. So this is just the top of the image view, and then dot constraint, and then you just see like a ton of different methods. We're going to be using this one. So constraint equal to some anchor and then some constant. So this just takes in some other anchor and then some constant, which is the offset. One more side note I probably should have mentioned earlier. For your devices, 0, 0 is the top left, and then the X increases as you go right, and then the Y increases as you go down. So like here might be like 400, 600, and then here's like 40, 0 or something. So that's just how the grid works. So we want to set the image view's top anchor to be 24 pixels offset from our view's top anchor. So what we're going to do here is do view dot, but since we're trying to add a constraint relative to our view controller view's top anchor, we have to do view dot safe area layout guide dot top anchor. So this is you only use safe area layout guide when you're positioning a view relative to your view controller's view. And then we want it to be offset by 24 pixels, so constant is just 24. Does that make sense? Cool. Next anchor we want to constrain is this center X anchor. So if you look at this image is centered horizontally. So what we want to do is set the image view's center X anchor to be equal to the view's center X anchor. So if you imagine our view is like this, and the center X anchor is just like in the middle. So we want to set the constraint for our image view center X anchor to be equal to our view's center X anchor. So the way we do that is similarly image view dot center X anchor dot constraint. This time, we're going to just use the constraint equal to, because there's no constant, there's no offset that we want to add. So just use the constraint equal to some anchor. And then here, we're going to do the view's center X anchor. Any questions? All right, perfect. So now we've told our application where our view is going to be vertically and where it is going to be horizontally. Now the last two things we have to tell it is how wide and how tall it's going to be, right? So let's say we want to make this 64 pixels by 64 pixels. We just have to add a constraint for the image view's width and height anchor. So to do that, we can do image view width anchor dot constraint, and then we're going to use the constraint equal to some constant. And then this constant is of type CG float, which is just some number. So for us, it's going to be 64. And then same thing for height. Image view the height anchor. That constraint equal to constant, and then constant should be 64. And then let's try running this again. And then you see that still nothing shows up. And the reason for that is because whenever we use constraints, there's one property that we always have to set. So this property is called translates. So go to your image view, right below the initializer, and then do image view that translates auto resizing mass into constraints. And then you just always want to set this to false. No one really knows what this actually does, but you just have to make sure you set this. If you don't set this, then things get messed up. So just make sure you set this every single time. So now let's run it again, and now we should see something. Oh, there we go. So now we have an image of Bill Gates, which is 24 pixels from the top, centered horizontally, and 64 by 64. Does everyone see that on their screen? Yeah. You got it? Oh. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Or do you need help?
Oh. All right, let's do right hand for TA, left hand for answering questions. Yeah.
What was that? Just so I didn't catch it.
This line, image view that translates auto resizing mass into constraints equals false. So you just have to make sure you set this for every single of your views. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you remember all these methods? Like,
By doing it a lot of times. Yeah. I mean, you can always just look them up. So like, let's do like Apple UI image view.
but if you're doing it for the first time, like you don't know which methods is causing, like which methods you don't even have.
What do you mean by methods?
Or like, sorry, not methods, but like the image.
The properties?
Yeah, the properties. Like you don't even know which ones you're missing, right? So like.
Yeah, I mean, I guess honestly, you sort of just do it. You just learn it by doing it a lot of times, like just like with anything else. But there's also a lot of good documentation. So if you just search up Apple UI image view, you see like all the methods and the properties that it has. So this is sort of like an example. But like honestly, it's just by doing it a lot. I think that's like the best answer. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when I first do this, I use a main storyboard to do
Yeah.
it. So why are you using code instead of
Oh, okay.
the UI view?
Good question. So her question was, why aren't we using storyboards? So for storyboards, I mean, you can develop application with storyboards, and like if your application is relatively small and like not really that complicated, that's fine. But the thing is, with storyboards, if you have a very complicated application, making changes is very difficult, right? Because like, let's say you have a view controller that has like a lot of nested views. If I want to change, let's say like some label and some cells and some nested collection views font, I have to like personally like go in and then try to zoom and then make sure I click on the correct view. But with code, everything is like laid out. You can read everything a lot clearly. It's just a lot better in terms of scalability and like in order for other people to work on the same application. Are these? Yeah.
For the top anchor, why did you put save area layout?
Yeah. So let me go back to the keynote. So whenever you want to constrain your views relative to your view controller views, top anchor or bottom anchor, you always should position it relative to the safe area layout guide, the top anchor and bottom anchor. The reason for that is because for certain devices like the iPhone 10 and iPhone 10s, there are certain places that you shouldn't be placing any views. So in this case, it's like this status bar area, and then the bottom there's this like extra padding that people use to close their applications. So you always want to do safe area layout guide. But if I'm like trying to position this label relative to this image view, I can just do bottom anchor. Yeah. Yeah.
What directory did you save Google Gates image in again?
Can you say that again?
Like where did you save Google Gates image?
In this assets.exe assets place. And then you just drag your image into here. Any other questions? Yeah? Oh, okay. Any other questions? Oh, yeah. should I just like go over this one more time or? Okay, so first we want to make an image view, right? So the first thing we want to do is declare as a variable of our class. The reason we do this is so that we can access this image view and any of the functions inside our class. So like let's say if I only declare this image view inside like let's say this viewDidLoad function, then I wouldn't be able to reference it in here. So that's why whenever you declare any views, you want to do it as a class variable. So that's the first step. And then second step is actually initializing it. And you want to do that inside viewDidLoad, which gets called after view controller gets loaded. So first step is to call the initializer. So it's just the class name and then open parentheses, close parentheses. The next line sets the translates auto resizing mask into constraints to be false. This is just some line you always have to set whenever you want to lay out your views using constraints. The third line is setting the actual image. So we have our image view, but we need to tell it what image to actually display. And the way we do that is by creating a UI image. And then we're using this constructor called named. It takes in a string, which is just the name of our image file that we created by dragging it into here. And then this line sets the clips to bounds to be true, which means that our image is going to be confined to the size of our image view. And then this content mode just sort of determines how to lay our image. So like whether or not to make it the full size of the image view, whether or not to keep the aspect ratio. Usually you just want to use scale aspect fit. And then this last line adds it as a subview to our view. And then after that we call this setup constraint function. And then inside our setup constraint function, we have this, we make this method call. Inside this method call, we create 4 different constraints. This first one makes it so that our image view's top anchor is 24 pixels from our view controller's top anchor. The center X anchor makes it so that it's equal to our view controller's center X anchor, so that it's like centered horizontally. This width anchor sets it so that it has a width of 64 pixels, and this height anchor sets it so that it has a height of 64 pixels. Any questions? Yeah. So the reason you want to, whenever you declare your view variables, you always want to use exclamation point, just because we know that we're always going to be initializing them. So you don't. It's like if you made it optional, you would always have to unwrap it before you can reference it. But since we know that we're going to initialize it, you can just put exclamation point. It just makes your code a lot easier to write. Any questions? Should we move on? Yeah.
What's the difference between like just a regular function and an override function?
So this function gets called specifically when your view controller gets loaded. And then this function is just like, you can just think of it as like a regular function. It's like, if we didn't call it here, then it just wouldn't call it. A function you can think about is just like declaration of declaration of some block of code to run, and then we just wanted to separate our code so that we don't have all this code inside our viewDidLoad. It just makes it a bit cleaner and easier to read. Are we good? Who's okay with moving on? Okay, I guess that's okay. Okay, I'm going to move on. If you have any questions, you can always raise your hands. So the next thing we're going to do is create this label. And essentially, this is just a UI label, so we're going to do something basically similar to what we did for our image view. We're going to first declare it on the top of our class. I'm going to call it name label. You can call it whatever you want, but like typically you should name your variables after what it actually does. So our name label is going to be of type UI label, and then you put the exclamation point. And then after we declare it, we also have to initialize it. So go back to our viewDidLoad function, and then we do name label equals UI label, open parentheses, close parentheses. This just instantiates our UI label. So every label has this property called text, and this text property is of type string. this essentially just tells it what string to display. So going back to our image, the string we're going to display is hi, I'm Bill Gates. So we're just going to type name label.text equals hi, I'm Bill Gates. Next thing we're going to want to do is declare the font. So labels also have a font property, and it's of type UI font. So to create a font, you do UI font dot system, and then you see this method. There's two. One is system font of size, and the other one is system font of size, and then some weight. So this we're gonna use the one that says of size and weight. The size just takes in some number. So let's say we want it to be font 16, and then we want to make it bold, right? So if you look at the type of font of weight, it says UI font dot weight. This is an enum, so we can just do dot, and then you'll see all the different ones. You have UI font dot weight dot black dot bold, heavy, light, medium, regular. We're gonna do bold. Next thing we're gonna do is set the text alignment property. This text alignment determines how to display your text within your label. So by default, it displays your text towards the left. So like wherever the left of your label is, that's where it's going to begin displaying your text. But we want to make it center aligned. So we're going to do name label that text alignment equals, this is also an enum of, so we're going to do dot center. But you can also see all the different ones: left, natural, right, justified, and center. We're going to do center. Something else we're going to set is the text color. This is of type UI color, and it just tells, it just says what color to make your text. By default, it's black, so we actually don't have to set this because we're going to set it to be black anyways. But if you want it to be like red or blue or purple, you could do it here. And the last thing we're going to do is add it as a subview to our actual view controller's view. So view.add subview name label. Any questions up to here? Oh, we also forgot to set the translates auto resizing mask into constraints to be false. So let's just do that.
You have to do that for everything.
For yes, for any view that you're gonna lay out with constraints, you have to remember to set that to be false. So now we've set up the label. Now we have to create constraint for it. So let's go back to our setup constraint function. What we could do is just add all our constraints for our name label in here, and then just like make this huge, make just like one huge block. But something that's better to do is just to make another call to the same method, and then put our constraints in there. You don't have to, but this just makes it a lot more readable, so that you know for every single block you're only putting constraints for one type of view. So we're gonna do the same thing, and then here we're gonna put constraints for our name label. So let's see what constraints we want to put. Let's say I want to make the top of this label be 8 pixels from the bottom of my image view. So top of the label, 8 pixels offset from the bottom of my image view. Can someone tell me how they would do that? Yeah.
So do you do top, do you do like image view dot constraint equal to view image view constant 8?
Close. So what kind of anchor do we want to set? We want to set the name label's top anchor, right?
Oh, okay, so it'll be top anchor.
Yeah, so name label. So first like the view dot top anchor, and then we want to define some constraint for this. And then we're going to be using this one, equal to some anchor and then some constant. What should be in here? Yeah. Close, not view.image view. We could just do image view, right? You don't have to do view.image view. Because we're just positioning it relative to image view's bottom anchor. So image view.bottom anchor. And then the offset is just going to be our constant 8. So now our name label's top is 8 pixels from our image view's bottom. And then let's say we wanted to make the left edge equal to our view's left edge. So like our label should begin here. How would we do that? So we're setting the leading anchor for the name label. Anyone have an idea? Do you want to take it? Yeah.
Name label dot leading anchor
Yeah.
dot constraint
Yep.
like equal to
Yep.
image view dot
We want to set it equal to the view's leading anchor. Yeah.
is it like view dot
Yep. Exactly. Perfect. So this sets our name label's leading anchor to be equal to our view's leading anchor.
Would it be view controller?
No. Our view controller isn't our view controller isn't actually a view. Like a view controller is sort of like the object that manages a view and other objects. But a view controller has a view property, and that's what this whole thing is. Okay. Let's say we want to do the same thing for trailing anchor. So we want the label's trailing anchor to equal our view controller view's trailing anchor. What we would do is something similar. It's just name label dot trailing anchor dot constraint equal to, and then view dot trailing anchor. So now we've told our application where the top is, where the left is, where the right is. So that sort of defines the y value and the width. Last thing we need to do is tell our application how tall to make it. So let's say we wanted to make this 24 pixels high. How would we do that? Yeah.
The name label dot bottom anchor dot constraint equal to name label dot top anchor with constant of 24.
I get where you're coming from, but there's something a lot easier we could do. Yeah.
Don't you use high anchor?
Yeah, high anchor. And then constraint equal to some float. So I get where you're coming from with like the offset, but if we want to set the height, we can just set it equal to the height directly to be 24. So now let's just run that and see what we get. We should see our label now in the correct position. There we go. Now we have our label that's positioned below our image view. It has a height of 24. The leading is here, the trailing is here, and the top is offset from the image view's bottom by 8 pixels. Any questions about that? Is there anything like yeah?
Why do you have to set if everything is in relative to Bill Gates image, which we laid out earlier, image view? Why do we have to set like height anchor, for example? Because we've already set the bottom. We've already set top anchor, image view dot bottom anchor. So
Wait, can
it's
you?
already reference to the image, the label.
So what are you asking like why we have to set this?
Yeah.
Well, we haven't like set how tall our label should be, right? Like how would you, if we didn't have this, what would the height be?
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. Like unless you tell your application what to do, it wouldn't know how much to set it. Does that make sense? Any other questions? Okay, the last thing we're gonna add is this text view. So text views are sort of similar to labels, except they're used for displaying a lot more text, and generally they span across like multiple lines. So this is sort of like why we use a text view. So we're just gonna do this sort of a similar process. Var, I'm gonna call it bio text view for biography. Is of type UI text view, and exclamation point because we're gonna set up. And then we go back to our view did load, set bio text view equal to UI text view, open parentheses, close parentheses. And then set our translates auto resizing mass into constraints to be false. And then similar to labels, text views have this has this text property, which takes in some string. And then I'm just gonna see if I have this string open somewhere. Hold up. You can just type in whatever string you want, but I'm gonna actually I'm just gonna type something random. This is some text. This is some text. Text blah blah blah. And then let's copy and paste this. And then let's say also, if you look at this image here, there are some like new lines. The way we do that is just by inserting \n into our string. So if you do \n, it'll create this like line break. So just place \n in random places. Perfect. Now we're gonna set the text color. The text color here is white, so we're just gonna do bioTextView.text color is equal to .white. We also want to set the background color. The background color here is like purple. It looks like. So bioTextView.background color is .purple. And then let's set the font. So similar to label, you just do bioTextView.font is UI font.system, and then we're gonna use the same of size and weight constructor. So the size, we're gonna make it 14. And then this seems to be kind of thin, so we're gonna be using the .light weight. And then for text views, there are actually, you can either make it editable, or as in like the user can tap on it and then edit the text that's inside, or make it not editable. We don't want to allow the user to change it, so we're gonna do bioTextView.isEditable. It's just some boolean, so true or false. We want it to be false. So now when the user taps on it, they won't be able to edit what's inside. And then the last thing is we just add it as a subview to our view controller's view. Any questions? Yeah.
I forgot what the subview is.
Can you say that again?
The subview, like view.add subview.
Yeah, what does that do?
Yeah.
So just, if you think about it, our view controller's view is like this whole screen right here, like this. It's just like this huge rectangle. We want to add views on top of it, right? So we want this to be inside our view controller's view. And the way we do that is just by calling add subview. It's sort of it would be like sort of like adding children to the view. It's like this belongs to our view controller's view because it's inside. Yeah. Okay, now let's set up the constraints again. Again, we're going to put it in its own new method call because we don't want our code to be like really messy. So NSLayout constraint.activate, and then the same constraints method. And then let's say we want to set the top to be 50 pixels from our label's bottom. So the top is 50 pixels offset from our label's bottom. Does anyone tell me how to do that? Yeah.
bioTextView.topAnchor.constraint
Yeah.
equal to nameLabel.bottomAnchor constant, whatever you said, 50 is like.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to set the constraint for the bioTextView's top anchor, and we just wanted to constrain it to be equal to the name label's bottom anchor plus 50 pixels. So bottom plus 50. So like when you create constraints, you can sort of just like think about how you would do it in words. I want to set the top to be the name label's bottom offset by 24. So usually you can just like say in your head how you would do it, and then it should like be pretty clear how to do it in code. And then let's say we want to set the leading to be 8 pixels offset from our view controller view's leading. So to do that, we're just going to do bioTextView.leadingAnchor.constraint. and then the same equal to constant method. This is going to be the views leading anchor, and then offset by 8 pixels. And then let's say we wanted the right our right edge to be 8 pixels from our view's right edge. We would do biotech view dot trailing anchor dot constraint, and then same thing again, equal to and constant view dot trailing anchor. And then can anyone tell me what this constant would be?
8.
It actually would not be 8. Yeah.
Negative 8?
Yeah, negative 8. So if you remember, the origin begins here, and x increases as you go right. So we want the right of our biotext view to be 8 pixels to the left, right? So it should be negative 8. Because since our view's trailing anchor is here, our biotext view's trailing anchor is here. It's towards the left, so it should be negative 8. And then lastly, let's say we wanted to set the bottom anchor to be 8 pixels from our view's bottom anchor. Would be biotech view dot bottom anchor dot constraint, and then what anchor will we set it relative to? Close? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Since we're positioning it relative to the view controller's view, bottom anchor, we need to do safe area layout guide. So view.safe area layout guide bottom anchor. You just have to do this whenever you're positioning views relative to your view controller's view, just to make sure that you don't put any views inside here or here. And then how about the constant? We want it to be 8 pixels from the bottom. Yeah. So negative 8. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So since the y increases as we go down, if we want it to be above the view's bottom anchor, it should be negative 8. And then I think that should be it. Let's try running that. And there we go. Now we have this image view, this label, this text view, and then some text inside. Any questions about anything?
What if we want to change the color in a RGB color? We cannot type the name of the color.
Okay, yeah. So if you wanted to set it to some UI color with some specific RGB value, you could do UI color, and then if you do open parentheses, there should be one called red, green, blue, alpha, and then you just put your RGB values in here.
You're divided by 2.
Yeah, you also have to divide it by 255. So like, let's say it's like 50, 50, 51. You would have to do 50 over 255, 50 over 255, 50 over 255. And then alpha, just make it 1.0. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
T.
okay.
Yeah.
Can you zoom in?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
What does alpha mean to the
Alpha is just like the opacity. So like if you make it 0, it's just like transparent. If you make it 1, it's like the full color. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, that's it for the demo. Let's just go back here. So some action items for next lecture. Our second project will be due October 10th, which is the day after fall break. We will be hosting office hours on that day. So like if you have any questions, you can come to office hours. As always, you can always just ask on Piazza as well, and we should respond to you pretty quickly. And then our next lecture will be the Monday afterwards. So next Monday we have break, so we won't have lecture next week. The next lecture will be the week after that. So October 15th at 7:30. And that's it. Enjoy fall break.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the code?
Yeah.
Thanks.
The code is also going to be in the YouTube video, so if you didn't get everything, we're going to be uploading the YouTube video.
Hey guys, I'm gonna be continuing our lecture today. So if we run our code, let's just see what we have right now. We've essentially finished building out our application. The only thing that we did not get to do is change this label to a button. So we're gonna want to change it so that this is a button, and whenever we tap on it, the color for this button changes to blue, and then if we tap on it again, it changes back to black. So that's what we're gonna be doing. So let's just go back to our code. Essentially, we're just gonna be replacing this name label with a button. So let's just change this to name button, and then of UI button. And then let's comment out the code for our label, because we're not going to be using the label anymore. Okay, so we're going to go through a similar process. We're going to first initialize this button by doing name button equals UI button, open parentheses, close parentheses. And then on the next line, we have to do our translates all resizing mass into constraints into to be false, because we're going to be laying out constraints for this button, so we just always have to set this property to be false. In the next line, we want to set the text for the button, or in this case it's called the title. So the way we would do that is do name button that there should be a set title method that takes in a string, and then for some state, so it's asking you for what state do you want to display this title. For the title, we want it to say, "Hi, I'm Bill Gates." And then for the control state, if you do dot, you should see a lot of different states. We want it to always say, "Hi, I'm Bill Gates," so we're just gonna use the normal state. So this just means that in the normal state, it's gonna display, "Hi, I'm Bill Gates." And then let's say you wanted to set the title color. We would do name button dot set title color for some state. For the color, it takes in the UI color, so we're going to use dot black. For some state, again, we're going to do dot normal. Next, let's say we want to change the font of this title. The way we would do that is do name button. Every button has a title label, which is the UI label that they use inside of the button to display the text. And then you want to change its font to some new font. So here we're going to do UI font system, and then we're going to use the system font with size and weight method. For size, let's make it 16, and then weight dot bold, just like we did for our label right here. And then the last thing we have to do is register some function that to be called whenever this button gets tapped. So the way we do that is using this method called add target. So what this method does, it takes in a target, an action, and for what event do you want to call this new method. So target is just like what object is going to implement this function that's going to be called. So in our case, we're going to do self, because our vehicle controller is going to be the one that implements our function. For selector, the syntax is hashtag selector, and then here you just put in the name of the method that's going to be called. So let's call the new function name button was tapped, and then for what event we want it to be called when the user taps on our button. So that event is going to be called touch up inside. If you read, it says a touch up event in the control where the finger is inside the bounds of the control. This just means when we tap on the button. Now that we've registered this function to be called, we actually have to implement it. So let's go down here. Whenever you're implementing function for buttons, you always have to begin it with @Objective-C, and then func, and then your function name. This is just like something that Excel recently added. Just make sure you have it every time. It doesn't really mean anything specific. So now the error should go away, and perfect. So we'll fill this in later, but let's just continue here. The last step for this button is to add as a subview for view controller view. So view.add subview name button. And then let's change this to name button. And our constraints for our button are going to be essentially the same as for our label, just because we want it to be positioned and be the same exact size. So let's just copy over this code, paste it, and then replace this with name button. So now let's actually in here let's print something. So let's say button was tapped. So theoretically, when we run this, we should see our button, and then whenever we tap our button, this function name button was tapped should be called, and then we should see this print statement getting printed in our console. So let's try running that. Alright, now we have this button. Let's try clicking on it, and you see here, button was tapped. Let's tap on it again. Button was tapped. Tap, tap, tap. Alright, there we go. So it seems like it's working. Now here we just have to implement the logic that changes the color. So so the functionality we want is when the current color is black, we want to change it to blue, and when it's blue, we want to change it to black. So the way we're going to do that is we're gonna do if name button dot title color for some state. So for this method, you just have to input some state, and then it'll tell you what the title color for that state is. So in our case, we set the title color to be black for dot normal. So here we want to do if the title color is dot black, we want to set the new title color to be dot blue for dot normal. Otherwise, if the color is blue, we want to set it back to be black. So dot set title color dot black for dot normal. So going over that one more time, if the current title color is black, we're gonna change the title color to be blue, and then if the title color is not black, we're gonna change it back to black. So let's run that and see what happens. Tap, now it's blue, and then tap, it's black again. Tap blue, tap black. So yeah, that concludes this lecture. If you have any questions, please post on Piazza.